So often I get my ideas for my blog posts, my YouTube clips, my podcasts, etc., from emails that people send to me. And I received an email that really, it spoke to me about how people don't open up because they feel that they are going to be judged. And there, people, we do judge, we make assessments, but it's not that kind of a judgment. It's more like a harsh judgment, putting down. And so this particular post that I'm sharing today is titled "Good Conversations Don't Leave You Feeling Judged." And so often, yeah, they didn't want the conversation because they didn't want that particular conversation because they knew that they would feel judged afterwards. Feelings of being dismissed, ridiculed, shut down, boom, laughed at and mocked at would land already on the fragile soul. All they wanted was for someone to listen to them without any sense of condemnation. Instead, they were like a snail retreating into its shell, and they hid. Uh, Perhaps an internet search would provide some answers. That's always works, doesn't it? A place where you get some answers, not always the best ones, but without any risk of exposure to judgment. It's totally anonymous and risk-free of being judged for having possibly suicidal thoughts. It's safe, it's private, and you're in control. And so we type in what actually needs to be heard by others. And so often I think people come to Turning the Page, my website, because they've typed in something that really needs to be heard by somebody else, but they type it in because they want some sort of answers. And for this particular person that emailed me was because they were presented with a whole lot of phone numbers and things that they didn't want to talk to anybody. They just wanted information and an email address, and so they emailed me. So I felt it was quite privileged. But I think we all want to be known, but so often we don't want to be seen. And I've been there, and you probably have too. You've shared something and felt the dismissal, the quick advice, the condemnation. Every time this happens, we tend to build thicker and thicker walls from the inside out. No, you're not going to go inside and see me. And then, and if you do expose yourself, well, then you're given a label or a diagnosis or a category, and other people's judgments about you become like concrete porridge around your movement. You just can't move because people have made judgments about you, and perhaps you have adopted them as truth. And instead, that you actually really, really long for a good conversation, one where there's no risk of judgment, no rejection, humiliation, or of what you're feeling is being ignored. You don't want to feel those things as being ignored by someone. You'll get some information, some help, maybe some different perspectives offered, so that you'll become a little bit more equipped to handle those really dark moments. And there's a really interesting Jesus story about a man who I believed who lived in great fear of others judging him. And he was always in the public eye. And his name was Nicodemus, and he was a member of the Jewish ruling council. So very clever man, very smart, very intelligent. And actually Jesus called him a teacher of Israel. And he was one, I imagine there was someone that others watched incredibly closely. They kind of modeled their lives off him. And yet, in his secret, private life, he had questions that he just could not share with anyone because he felt that if he did so, he might lose everything. And so he came to Jesus at night, a time when no one would see him. And I imagine him skulking around the corners and so on, being very secretive about what he was doing. Here's the passage of scripture. There was a man of the Pharisee sect, Nicodemus, a prominent leader among the Jews. Late one night, he visited Jesus and said, "Rabbi, we all know you're a teacher straight from God. No one could do all the God-pointing, God-revealing acts you do if God weren't in on it." And I think if if it was today and Nicodemus wanted his questions answered, he might actually send Jesus a very private email that no one else would see. And I think that's what people do with me. They send me emails. And you can too. The email address is barry@turningthepage.co.nz, and there's a link in the show notes below if you want to send me an email about anything. And it's also interesting that for my email, put out a weekly email to people. I send it out. I have a very high open rate, around about 50%. And I think it's because people want what I want to write, but they like their privacy. And so they want the information, but without the risk of a conversation. And some email me back, which I really, really like. I like to have emails come back to me and form relationships with people. And we get into conversations, and I learn a bit more about them, and they learn a bit more about me. And I think it actually helps us both, and it certainly helps me to write content that is useful for people. But I often hear the words, "Please don't judge me." I hear that often, and it's a plea to not make condemning conclusions. Others may have done this, and now this person lives in the dark shadows of those words. See, what they most yearn for is to be listened to. They want someone to listen to the whole of their story and for help to make sense of it all. Often their soul has been seen as something to be fixed, advised, saved, or set straight. And that's a little acronym called FASS, F-A-S-S. Their soul is certainly something not to go deep with. No, we rush over it, we quickly sort it all out, and you feel judged. Someone recently said to me that what they needed the most was, listen to this, an oasis of gentle curiosity in a desert of hot judgment. I'll read that again. An oasis of gentle curiosity in a desert of hot sun judgment. A place where you can sit, drink cool water, and talk if needed. Someone to stop and breathe with. A conversation where you know it is safe to tell the other how things really are, and that your disclosures aren't going to be spread around the marketplace, told to everybody, or used as some kind of case study. And that's what a good conversation gives to both parties. Gentle, unrushed, and certainly non-judgmental curiosity. And in the post, I've got a picture of an oasis. Look, our feelings are our responsibility. We have to own them ourselves. But the actions of others can certainly blow on the wind vane of our feelings, and we can shut up. So if someone has been vulnerable with you, I've got 5 suggestions. Number 1, don't rush the conversation. I say it again, don't rush the conversation. Let it unfold at its own pace. Number 2, ensure the privacy of the moment. They need to know that their exposure is safe. You're not going to share it with other people. You're not going to expose them. Number 3, ask lots of gently curious questions. I like that, gently curious questions. Make it your goal to have a higher ratio of questions to answers. Number 4, be open about how you don't have all the answers. They need to hear your own inadequacy and vulnerability, that you don't have all the answers, but that you'll listen. Number 5, tell them they are loved, held, and known, even in the midst of their mess. They need just to know that they're loved, held, and known. Hey, let's develop our listening. So Others know where they can find an oasis in the desert of hot sun judgment. Here's some quotes. It is much easier to look for someone to blame, sue, expel, or expose when there is no coherent meaning or divine purpose in the world. Someone has to be at fault for my unhappy life. That's Richard Raw. Sinners often speak the truth, and saints have led people astray. Examine what is said, not the one who says it. Anthony de Mello. He condemned nothing in haste and without taking circumstances into I'll say that again. He condemned nothing in haste and without taking circumstances into account. He said, examine the road over which the fault has passed. Victor Hugo. Sensitive listeners respond to comments with words that convey an interest in hearing more. Sentences that open the door to information. Words that open doors transmit two messages. 1, I'm interested in whatever you have to say. 2, I will accept you regardless of what you say. Larry Crabb. A brother has not given up all things if he holds on to the purse of his own opinions. St. Francis of Assisi. Some questions. What experiences have you had where you have felt judged without being fully listened to? Number 2, what is needed to fully listen to someone? What is needed? And number 3, Larry Crabb writes, words that open doors transmit two messages. 1, I'm interested in whatever you have to say. And 2, I will accept you regardless of what you say. What words open doors for you to be vulnerable and honest? And here's a formation exercise. Listen to someone with the attitude of, I'm interested in whatever you say, and I'll accept you regardless of what you say. What gets stirred up in you as you practice this? What gets stirred up as you listen like that? I hope you found this helpful. Feeling judged is very common and very damaging. And I would encourage you to share this post wherever you are listening to it or watching it. Send it to some people. And thank you for watching or listening. And I pray that you've found it really helpful. Send me an email. I love to hear. I love to get response from listeners and readers. And if you want to, please subscribe in the button on the YouTube or on the podcast. That'd be wonderful. Okay. Thanks very much. And I pray that you would be having good conversations.